When workers started demolishing the old movie theater on Main Street in Port Washington, they expected to find drywall and empty space. Instead, they uncovered something that wasn't supposed to be there. A hidden 1920s theater that had been sealed behind multiplex walls for decades. Gold leaf columns, decorative plaster, the original balcony, an entire movie palace buried inside the building. And now that theater is about to reopen. But not as a movie theater. The plan is to turn it into something Port Washington has never had before. A Gatsby-style dinner theater. Live music, comedy, private events, full dining service inside of the restored auditorium. There's even a sushi bar and a tucked away speakeasy somewhere in the building. And all of it is happening right on Main Street, inside the old Beacon Theater, which sounds exciting until you actually look at where this building sits, right in the middle of Main Street on Port Washington, steps away from the Long Island Railroad between Shore Road and Port Boulevard. If you know Port, you know this is a stretch where traffic, parking, and walkability all collide, which means this project isn't just reopening a theater, it's reopening a building in one of the most logistically complicated blocks in town. When something new opens here, it doesn't just affect the people going to the show, it affects the entire block. Cars circling for parking, cars pulling up for valet, sidewalks filling up before and after the shows. Sometimes that kind of energy is exactly what a downtown needs. Other times, it creates friction. So today, I want to break down what's actually happening inside of that building, what the town has approved, what neighbors are really saying, and what projects like this typically mean depending on where you live. Because a project like this can absolutely become a huge asset and still create tension, especially in a location like this, because there's one logistical question about this project that will determine whether it becomes a success or a constant headache for the neighborhood. And we'll come back to that. But first, it helps to understand the building itself. So let's rewind for a minute. The Beacon Theater was built in the mid-1920s, back when Main Street was the center of everything in Port Washington. It opened as a single-screen theater with roughly 1,500 seats. Stage performances, silent films, a full pipe organ, which if you know, that takes up most of the building. People dressed up to go there. It wasn't just a movie house. It was a gathering place for the entire community. Over the decades, like many historic theaters, it evolved. The large auditorium was eventually divided into smaller theaters as the multiplex era took over. Clearview operated it, later Bowtie Cinemas. And for years, it was part of the normal rhythm of Main Street until January 2018. The lights went out. And for the next 5 years, the building just sat there. Dark marquee, empty lobby. One of those places everyone walked past thinking, something's gotta go in there. In 2023, a company called Tribeca Muse Limited purchased the property for about $2.85 million. And when renovation began, something unexpected happened. As crews started removing the multiplex walls inside the building, they discovered the original theater was still there. The balcony, the original sightliness, the decorative plaster, Beaux Arts architectural details hidden behind the drywall for decades. The theater hadn't disappeared. It had simply been buried. And that discovery changed the entire direction of the project, because what the developers originally expected to renovate suddenly became something worth restoring. So why is this happening now? Why reopen a theater in 2027 when the movie theaters everywhere are struggling? There's a few reasons. First, the traditional movie theater model simply isn't viable anymore. Streaming changed how people watch movies. COVID accelerated that shift. Reopening this building as just another cinema probably wouldn't work financially. Second, Main Street itself has changed. Hybrid work means more people are home during the week. Household incomes in Port Washington are strong, and more communities like this are looking for destination-style evenings close to home instead of commuting into Manhattan every time they want entertainment. And third, downtowns either evolve or they slowly fade away. When a large building sits vacant in the middle of a main street for years, it starts to affect how the entire area feels, and perception matters more than people realize. So what exactly are they building inside the? Because when people hear the phrase dinner theater, they tend to picture folding chairs and buffet trays. But that's not what this is. The core concept is a reservation-only dinner theater built inside the restored auditorium. Tables facing a stage, full dinner service during the performance, live programming, music, comedy, films, private events. The space is designed to be flexible. One night it might host a live band, another night a comedy show. Other nights could be weddings, private parties, or even community events. But the theater itself isn't the only part of the project. Inside the building, there will also be a sushi bar, and somewhere within the venue, tucked away, a speakeasy-style lounge. The technical infrastructure is being completely rebuilt. Modern audio systems and professional stage lighting, a large format 3D cinema screen. Because so much of the original architecture was uncovered, the restoration will preserve the balcony and historic detailing while bringing the building fully up to modern safety code. This isn't just a cosmetic renovation, it's a total full restoration. The total investment is expected to be around $15 million, which is a serious commitment for a single building on Main Street. Now let's come back to the logistical question, okay? Parking, because the Beacon Theater does not have its own dedicated parking lot. In 2024, the town of North Hempstead, their Board of Zoning Appeals granted a conditional use permit along with parking variance. The operating plan relies on valet service, agreements with nearby lots, and the use of commuter parking after peak train hours. Whether that system works smoothly, it's going to determine a lot, because this is an event-driven venue. Picture a typical Friday night. Show starts, let's call it 7:30, and most guests arrive within a tight window, somewhere between, let's call it 6:45 and 7:20. Then a few hours later, many of those same guests leave within another short window. That creates waves of traffic. Cars arriving, cars leaving, people moving in and out of the area all at once. If the system runs smoothly, it feels organized. If it doesn't, it feels chaotic. Now, there's another layer that matters here. Who is actually responsible if this doesn't work? So the building owner, Brad Thurman, is a Port Washington resident, and the operator behind the concept, Lou Braccanelli, comes from a background in hospitality and live entertainment. Why does this matter? Because this isn't outside investors parachuting in and disappearing. The people behind it live here. If the operations don't run smoothly, they'll probably hear about it. That doesn't guarantee that everything will work perfectly, but it does change the incentives. So how does the community actually feel about this project? Well, depends who you ask. Institutionally, there's been strong support. More than 500 letters were submitted during the permitting process. The Chamber of Commerce backed the project. Landmark on Main Street welcomed the idea of restoring the theater downtown. The homeowners, especially those who live closest to Main Street, tend to be a little more cautious. Most people like the concept, and they like preserving a historic building. They like bringing activity back to a space that's been vacant for years, but two concerns come up again: parking and traffic. Because people are imagining what an event might look like: cars arriving before a show, people searching for parking near the train station, weaving in and out of the side streets, crowds leaving at the same time later in the evening. This isn't a loud opposition, it's a cautious optimism. Most people seem to be saying the same thing. We love the idea, just make sure it works. Now let's talk about the real estate side of this. Because the projects like this tend to influence a downtown in ways that aren't always obvious at first, historic theater restorations in walkable downtowns often support long-term desirability, not because of the building itself, but because of what it represents: energy, activity, things to do within walking distance. Buyers don't just buy homes, they buy what surrounds them. And being able to say, we're just a short walk to dinner and a show, changes how a neighborhood feels and how listings get marketed. But the effect isn't the same everywhere. In towns like Port Washington, Micro locations matter a lot. Homes immediately adjacent to Main Street, especially near train station corridor, they'll feel an intensity of event venue more directly. Traffic, parking pressure, more evening traffic. A few blocks away though, they can become the same sweet spot. Close enough to walk, far enough to avoid the congestion. It's important to keep this in perspective. Port Washington home values are still driven primarily by a few factors: schools, train access, housing inventory, property taxes. The Beacon Theater doesn't override those fundamentals. What it influences is perception, and the perception influences demand. Now zoom out for a second, because projects like this usually move in one of two directions. The doors open in 2027, the marquee lights come back on, and Main Street has energy again. And from there, the story splits. Future 1, the venue runs beautifully, valet works smoothly, programming is strong, the calendar stays full, and nearby listings start mentioning something new: walk to dinner and live entertainment. Future 2, operations become inconsistent, parking spills into surrounding streets, neighbors get frustrated, the venue doesn't fail, but it becomes complicated. The difference between those two futures isn't the building, it's the management. Buildings don't determine value, experience does. And that's why I cover projects like this here, because real estate in Port Washington isn't just about square footage and mortgage rates, it's about understanding the changes happening around you. Zoning decisions, downtown development, the kind of projects that slowly shape how a place feels over time. The Beacon Theater is one of those projects. It's not just reopening a building, it's reopening a chapter in Port Washington's story. And if you live here, you're part of that story too, whether you're excited about it or watching carefully from your driveway on a Saturday night. If you want more breakdowns of how development, zoning, and local changes affect property values in Port Washington, subscribe to the channel. I'll keep explaining it in a practical, non-dramatic way. And if you ever want to talk about how something like this might affect your property, your block, or your timing in the market, feel free to reach out, because in a market like Port Washington, positioning almost always matters more than headlines.